Hey, welcome back. In this video, we're going to dive into a built-in module for testing called Unittest. Out of all the things that I've shown you in this section, Unittest is by far the most popular and, in my opinion, the easiest to use. It has a bunch of powerful features for testing that things like doc test just don't have. But before we even dive into that, let's talk about unit testing. So unit testing is a concept external. It's outside of Python or the unit test framework. Unit testing is simply the idea of when you're testing your application, you test really small individual components, small pieces, which you would call units. Things like an individual class. You test the entire class, you test a module, you test a function. Your focus is on these small units rather than, testing an entire application in one go, or testing multiple interactions between classes in one go. You focus on having full coverage of the smaller units that make up the larger application. So unit test is a testing framework, which means that yes, we have to forego a little bit of flexibility. We have to abide by the rules, the scaffolding that unit test forces us to live in. But if we do that, we get a lot of powerful features for free out of the box. And there's very good documentation on it. There's basic examples. There's talks about the command line interface to run the tests. But then the bulk of what we're going to talk about are these assertions right here. So it comes with a bunch of these built-in assertions that we can run that do things like test if something is true, or two things are not equal, or something is not in a set or in a list, or is not none. So we'll come back to this, but this is kind of the value that we get. Rather than having to write just assert, we get all these fancier assertions, not to mention the fact that we also run all the tests together. We get a nice output, sort of like we get with a doc test. Okay, so run through these bullet points quickly. Built-in module called Unittest. We write unit tests encapsulated as classes that inherit from unittest.testCase. So you write your own classes, they inherit from that test case class, and that gives us a bunch of these assertions. And we write a bunch of tests that use those assertions to test the behavior of our code. And then finally, at the end, we run the test by calling the main method, unittest.main, and then that sets the test going. So let's say that I want to write functions to describe some classic great activities, eating and napping. Let's take a TDD approach and write some tests for these functions before implementing the functions themselves. And to do this, we have to get set up with the unit test module first. So we might have these two functions defined in a file called activities.py, and we just put pass inside of them, so they don't do anything at all. But then to set up unit test in another file, I'll call it test.py. This is what we need to do. So we import unit test, then we need to import the functionality we want to test. So I'm going to do it as from activities, the name of the file, import eat and nap. And then we have class, whatever we want this to be called, and it has to inherit from test case, unittest.testCase. And for now, we'll leave it blank. So I'll get these files set up, fast forward. Okay, so I have activities.py and then tests.py. And what I have going on, the only thing I didn't mention in the slide is at the bottom, I have this bit of code, unittest.main, that's going to execute, it's going to run our tests. There are no tests defined right now, but in a moment there will be. So all I have to do is run this tests.py file, and it should run all the tests because of this little bit of code we have here, as we saw in the modules section. So let's begin by writing a couple of tests. Let's focus on the eat function. We're going TDD style, so we write the intended tests, how we want it to work first, and they should fail. So we define a test in here. We can come up with a name for a function. So let's go test, and then we could call it test eat, and I'll show you in just a moment how we could organize this. So def test eat, and then it's an instance method, so we need self, and we'll do a self dot, and then there's all these assertions. So we can do assert equal, and here on the documentation we can see, going back to these assertions, assert equal, we just pass in two values and it checks if they're equal. And if they are, then the test passes. If they're not, the test fails. And then what are the two things we want to equal? Well, when we call eat, which we have up here, when we execute eat with, let's say, broccoli, and the way I want it to work is we also are going to pass in a keyword argument called isHealthy. And if we set isHealthy to be true, then it should return to me. So I'm going to do these on separate lines because it's getting quite long. Do this here. Okay, so eat broccoli is healthy is true. This is the behavior. I guess I didn't really tell you ahead of time, so this might be out of the blue, but this is the idea with TDD. You define the behavior that you want, how it should work. So this should return to me, I'm eating broccoli. And then let's say, because it's a healthy thing, because my body is a temple. All right, so that's because is healthy is true. And let's do another one down here, except this time I pass in, let's say pizza is healthy is now false. And then it's going to say I'm eating pizza because, and let's say because YOLO, you only live once. I think I'm a bit late for using YOLO, but let's leave it at that. So our behavior that we intend, it doesn't matter what you pass in, is healthy is the important part. If it's set to true, then it should print out I'm eating the food because my body is a temple. If it's set to false, I'm eating the food because you only live once. So we have these two assertions now, and of course they're not going to pass, but let's just try running the tests right now. All I have to do is execute tests.py. And here we go. So you can see what happened. We get one test, so it counted that one function as one test, and so it counted one failure. None was not equal to I'm eating broccoli because my body is a temple. That's what we expect. But my point that I want to hit home here is that you can have multiple assertions in a row like this, but these are testing different things. This is testing eat when we pass in healthy. This is testing eat when we pass in is healthy is false. So what I would do instead is call test eat healthy, and that would be one function. And then I would also have def test eat unhealthy. These are testing different things. And now if I run both of them, I now ran two tests, and there was two failures. Okay, and before we move on, let's write two more tests for nap. So I'll fast forward through these. Okay, so I added two more tests. This is for our nap function. So I have test short nap. If we call nap and I pass in 1, that's the number of hours, then I get I'm feeling refreshed after my 1 hour nap. And if I pass in 3, in this, I'm calling this def test long nap, test short nap, it gives me, ugh, I overslept. I didn't mean to nap for 3 hours. That's the worst when that happens. Except, honestly, I never feel refreshed. No matter how long or short my nap is, I'm always just really annoyed to wake up again. Okay, so these should all fail. And they do. Now we have the task of actually implementing them. Back in the activities file, let's start working with eat. So eat has food and is healthy. The way I want to go about this is set a variable, let's call it ending. And ending will just start as, so we have two endings, right? We have because YOLO and because my body is a temple. So I'll just do because YOLO first. The default value is going to be because YOLO. And then at the end, what I'm going to do is print, I'm going to return an F string, and I'll do something like I'm eating, and then food, comma, and then the ending. So we need a space there, and then I just write ending. So this should work for one of the tests already, because ending is set to because YOLO, assuming that I'm matching this exactly. I'm eating food, comma, space, because YOLO, exclamation point. So if I actually ran this right now, I should only have 3 failures now. Good. One of them is working. So now let's update this so that it checks if food, or if is healthy. So we'll just do if is healthy. We're going to set ending to now equal this right here as a string. And if we test it, sweet, only 2 failures. Kind of satisfying. This is why some people like TDD. Now let's work on nap. So nap has a num hours that's passed in, and we'll just check. I think our threshold will be if num hours is more than 2. Like I said, all naps make me grouchy, so this is not lifelike. But if it's greater than 2, we'll return the string, an F string. Let me copy it over here. So you can see how this works, though, both unit testing using unit tests, but also TDD in general. we're outlining the functionality, what we want to work first. So when we actually implement it, we don't have to make many decisions. Okay, I overslept. I didn't mean to nap for, and then here we want to put, what do we call it? Num hours. And if I execute this now, one failure. The one that's failing is when we try and take a 1 hour nap. So we need to fix that. So if num hours is greater than 2, otherwise we just return, and I'm going to copy this again. I'm feeling refreshed after my 1 hour nap. Technically, because this is greater than 2, let's make this greater than or equal to 2, and then this will just always be 1 hour. So we could just leave it at that, honestly. Well, if we had a negative hour nap, then we could do num hours. Anyways, that's not the focus of this, and we need an F string. Let's see if it works. Sweet, they are all running. Ran 4 tests, everything's okay. It's kind of anticlimactic. All we get is okay as our message, but it's working. We can also remedy this, the fact that we're not getting much information, by actually adding comments to our tests. Drum roll, here we go. I have a slide on it. So if we add a doc string to our test functions, like here's a dumb one, testing a thing, testing another thing, we'll actually get more information in the terminal when our tests run. And to run the tests, we can use -v when we run our file. So Python, the name of the test file, tests.py in our case, -v, which is for verbose, I believe. And actually, if we run that right now, if I just add that -v, what we get is the name of each test function. So it says test eat healthy, okay, test eat unhealthy, okay, rather than what we got before, which was just okay. So still not ideal, but it works. Like we can see what tests are actually running. But let's add comments. So go to our tests, and let's start with eat healthy. Do our triple double string. I hate typing that. And we just want to say something like eat should have a positive message for healthy eating. And then let's copy that for unhealthy and say eat should have, what kind of message is that? Eat should indicate you've given up for unhealthy eating. Okay, I'll add 2 more. I'll fast forward through it. So I added short naps should be refreshing for test short nap, and then long naps should be discouraging for test long nap. All right, so often just the name of this isn't enough. You want to have a description of how things should work. And if I run this on its own, nothing changes. I add the -v. There we go. Eat should have a positive message for eating healthy. Okay. Eat should indicate you've given up for eating unhealthy. Okay. And so on. All right. So I'll leave this video off here. In the next video, I'm going to focus on some other assertions that we can work with.